Again, I use that, and it is very stiff. I mean, for sure, that bloody light weight. It sounds, one may hear how it sounds, and it is, I immerse the entire shed, and obviously it is much stiffer with the collar, cuffs, and even this little bosom is than the rest of the shed. I mean, even the slits are stiffer. The rest is only one layer, but it is still almost as stiff, practically virtually as stiff as it can virtually be. Always use other methods perhaps to make it even stiffer. It is already quite stiff. I already perspired and it's whatever. The problems are really that. And again, why he says for darker colors. I reckon with darker colors it will be even more important not to use homemade starch or even that, but to use this, as he says, a can of starch. Why? It's because, as I understand it, darker colors, they retain their shape. They retain that shape, or that stiff shape, without any starch. Like post-1950 colors, most post-1950 colors flaunts or cuffs upon dress shirts because of the glued interlining. So not only does the glue act as an adhesive to stick that interlining, but also the glue itself, after having dried, is a layer in itself. Like for top hats, the traditional way with the gossamer is to add shellac, which is a sort of varnish, which once dry adds a layer, but also is an adhesive for then the fur to add on top the thick plush. Talking about look at how they make top hats and honey hats. Type honey hats and Kevin will explain, and you will understand the principles. So, to say that these modern collars are soft, yes, they are soft, but they are not as soft as if they were simply 2 layers, or even 3 layers, without any adhesives like this. Once these antique shirts have no more starch, once they are boiled, I've done it 1,000 times, they are very soft. They are not as soft as that. They cannot be because of the interlining, and especially the glue, which also sticks the interlining. But thus, it prevents the fabric from absorbing anything, let alone starch. It does absorb, but only a tiny amount. And what they do with darker colors is really for them to retain this sort of firm shape. And once worn, they practically look. Apparently, they are much more. Helen says that when I think it was him who said, I'm not sure, when he wears it, it is actually much more comfortable, much less stiff than a starched antique collar. But when he looks at himself in a mirror, or if I looked at someone wearing this soft collar, and then someone next to him wearing the exact same collar, but a traditional stiff and an antique collar without any adhesives, they would practically look the same. They retain their shape as much. It is only that once touched, they feel different, and they can be literally like bent fully at 180 degrees. If one did that to a traditionally starched collar, it would start making this horrible noise, and as he says, and it would crack and have these horrible cracks and wrinkles that would not go away afterwards, like on cement, like on these walls where they are white. After a wide, painful crack, it will look like that, and the only way to take away that crack would be to wet it again and iron it again. So basically what I mean to say is, if one compares the darker colors to modern, average, usually thrown in obviously, dress shirt collars and cuffs and so on, they look stiffer because, for example, on this shirt, and I will simply take that one as an example. This is a typical example of how shirts are made today. I took away the collar to wear the detachable collar. Initially it had a collar. So this shirt here, what they do is they usually have a foam interlining. I reckon it is usually a foam, yeah. It is sort of glued, or the foam itself is sort of an adhesive. This is made in chemical reaction, factories, and it adheres to the fabric, the outside fabric, and then the inside fabric does not adhere to it, does not stick to it. It remains free of movement. So, i.e., starch will principally, if you try to starch it using either Stafler, like a pre-made liquid starch, or worse, more traditional starch you would cook yourself, you will still be able to absorb the starch in the single layer that is like the body, and the body will absorb a lot of starch, as much as the body there on an antique shirt. But where you really want it to absorb is obviously all these layers. They will not really absorb because they have this foam stopping it. But with the Darcy washable collars, to have it look stiffer and more antique-like, and thus retain the shape better, and yet be washable and not require starch, they actually have this, I'll show it again, they actually laminate both layers. So basically the foam will not only be laminated onto the outside layer, but also the bottom layer that touches the skin and is not seen. And so this prevents the color even more, or the cuff or whatever. They only make washable colors, so it will prevent the color, this detachable washable color that Darcy makes, from absorbing any starch. Or they will absorb a minimum, but really just a minimum. And so hence why he says, I guess, only to use a can. Because again, on that shirt I did this one, I shot a video where it was very stiff. On this shirt I did. To some extent it worked even better, because the interlining used, I reckon, is first of all a fabric, whether it be polyester or whatever, not a foam. And I reckon this fabric has some natural fibers to it. And maybe it is entirely natural. Not what people had said before. And this fabric is unlaminated onto, for example, the collar. I could also check the inside. It is open onto the beginning of the inside of the collar, and I could see that actually the where it touches me right now, this part, is stuck to this interlining, which must be a sort of mixture between linen and polyester. But the outside part there is not stuck at all. So this part, like the body, has absorbed as much starch as this would, this antique 1910s shirt. And to some extent, this interlining, which again I reckon has some, see, this is the interlining, I reckon it has some natural fibers to it. Even this I can feel. It was really stiff before starching, but I think it's a bit stiffer. So it did manage to absorb more starch than this shirt. And furthermore, I guess, I have not seen these colors in real life, so it is very hard to tell, but I guess than the Darcy washable one. So it did, still it is, come on, very starched. Is it as starched as this 1891 shirt I showed briefly, that I starched with a Stafler? Not quite. This is meant to be starched heavily. If one desires to starch it heavily, some people back then would starch it only a bit. But if one wants it very stiff, it will get very stiff. But still, it sort of works. So what are the problems really are really more in some other parts of the shirt. So basically, the stiff part here, up until I think it stops about here really when I show, so it stops. This has this fabric, so it's alright. It looks very good. And it's probably easier to do than having to use a can. It costs more per users, it costs more actually to make the rest very stiff. One would have to use more than, or at least one full can, and this costs 20 dirhams. This costs 120 dirhams for the full thing, so, and this is easier to use. But the problem is, then from here onwards, is a cheaper foam. This is actually a foam, exactly the same type of foam than used in the cuff there. And so it looks less stiff, even when it's out of starch, and it can, obviously, it prevents from absorbing